Okay, so we are coming back today with CrossWIT. This is going to be part 2. My guest here is Terry Ballard. He's a friend of mine. We go way back. We go all the way back into the Marine Corps about 20 years ago. So we're going to get back with him in a second, pick up where we left off. Before I do that, I'd like to remind everybody, again, to please go to all of our social media platforms and give us a subscription on YouTube. That's extremely important to get your comments and your subscription on YouTube. Help us out there. Everything we do is free, so help us bring you this by showing us some support on social media. Also, hit our Facebook. If you're not liking and following our CrossWIT page, like following there. Feel free to send me a friend request on my personal page, Instagram, and just help us out there. And then finally, Podbean. That's where we have our audio podcasts. So if you're one of those people that are driving to work, spend a lot of time sitting around, can't watch it, just want to hear it, Podbean has a free app on Google Play and I believe on iTunes. The app is free, the podcast is free, nothing we do costs anything. So just listen, like, follow, share, subscribe, and support us here at CrossWIT Talk. So we're back with Terry Ballard, and when we left off, we were talking about the early days in the military and kind of the failure to follow through with training. We started with miles gear. We were talking about the laser tag equipment that we used to train with that didn't do a real good job as far as realistic and training you for how to persevere, how to fight through injuries and wounds. And then the last thing we had discussed or we had gotten into was the further implication of that, which was whenever we trained the old method of miles gear, if you were a casualty on the battlefield, basically you were dead and you just kind of walked off and you just weren't in play anymore, which in all the years we've been in warfare, one of the big things we learned that not only are you not combat, I mean, you are still combat effective even if you're wounded, but also even if you are a casualty on the battlefield, that has implications for not just you, for everyone else. You know, you have to be treated, you have to be dealt with. So we lost a lot of training by having a kind of a methodology to where everybody went on the battlefield, a laser took you out, and you just kind of, like a video game, almost like evaporated. Like, well, what happens then? You know, I mean, he's still relevant. Maybe he's still fighting. Maybe he can't fight, but he's going to be a medical issue. Maybe he's a death. Whatever it is, fighting through being wounded, even fatalities, all these things have consequences. They have effects on the battlefield. So, and that's kind of what we were talking about as far as the old method of training versus something more modern, and how does it affect law enforcement. And I saw this in the academy. I'm gonna give the academy some props. I know we had some guys there that were trying to get this mentality through police officers that, you know, when you get shot, even in our training scenarios, you're not dead. Okay, right. We may say you're shot, you continue to fight, and the police academy there in Camden was real adamant, and they were real persistent about teaching that fight through mentality. And I remember Bernie Mosley. I remember him. He was kind of pushing that. So there was a staff there, and of course we lost Atkins, recently. But he was very sad. Yeah, he was a he really pushed that mentality. Awesome instructor there, and they really was introducing the concept to officers who'd never been exposed to the type of training that. That being shot, being wounded, being hurt, the fight is still on, and it's your responsibility to continue that fight because someone's coming to help you. You need to be in the fight when they get there too. And
another, dropping another endorsement of Darcy Direct Action Resource Center in Galloway and Richard Mason. Early on in 2000, when I trained with him, he specifically told us, "You are not out of the fight until I tell you you are." And like I said, he walked the catwalk, observed everything, kind of directed the engagements.
Right.
And he told, I can remember, coming out of that shoot house, and I had ammunition rounds all over my face mask, which meant I'd basically been shot in the face
multiple times.
And I continued. He continued to stay in the fight, and it just, you can say whatever you want to about, well, that's not realistic, or it is realistic, or whatever, but
we don't know.
That ammunition round is going to hurt a whole lot less than a real round, and so I'll take the training value from that any day.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I was going to jump on before we took a break was, just like everything else, we've gone from miles gear to the simunitions, and now there's even there's a combination
Like a hybrid system of both?
hybrid system of miles, gear, and simunition, so you can get the actual physical discomfort of the short range engagement with the simunitions, and you can get the long range engagement that the miles gear provides you when you're combining forces, which, you know, that gives you a little bit more flexibility in your training scenarios and stuff.
Right.
And we learn with everything. For a long time, we just didn't pay attention, you know, but again, like you said earlier, being at war for this amount of time and all the technological advances that have taken place, we've learned, we've made better systems. You know, we're actually reading our after actions reviews and trying to
learn from the hindsight.
Right.
And that's the, you know, and nothing that I say, because in a way it's kind of unfair sometimes, or it seems that way. You know, people will come up with good ideas, and then in 4 years later of real world experience, then we'll realize that, you know, that idea wasn't thorough enough, or even maybe it was incorrect or whatever, and we tend to jump on it in hindsight saying that was a stupid thing, we should have never done that. But you got to put yourself in that perspective. That was probably the best we could have done at that time. And I don't think anybody would say that miles gear in like the 1980s, 1990s compared to training in the 1960s was a bad thing. You know, we would say, well, crap, we got to compare it to, you know, not having anything. Like you just said, it, you know, that was better than the bang bang, you know, and we saw that transition. You know, we actually witnessed that. So miles gear, a great thing as far as an improvement. It just, you know, it took experience, and it took people thinking outside the box and kind of carrying that idea all the way to the end. And I think really probably for the military these days, seeing that idea firsthand for the first time in a long time in combat when we started in 01, to carry these and realize, you know what, miles gear was great for this purpose, but it's not addressing some very crucial, realistic things that are going on the battlefield, and we need to do that.
And you know, one of the other things that has evolved from that, certainly not just because of the miles gear, but just because we've realized that it's an issue, is body armor. Which I'm not going to talk too much about body armor, because I mean it's kind of an accessory, you know. But the other thing we've determined that not only is it good to be able to defend yourself with a gun and a bullet, but we've also determined that it's good to be able to mend yourself with a tourniquet and gauze.
My God, that's a great point.
And
that is one of the best points.
You know, whether you preserve yourself from dying or you preserve yourself as a combatant on the battlefield, no matter how big it is, you need, as a martial artist, you need to include that in your training.
And I want to hit something he said there, because I know some people are going, what? Y'all just jumped into karate? And when he's talking about a martial artist, he's talking about a martial artist in the Marine Corps sense, in the warrior sense, in the true militant sense of the word. And he's talking about someone whose profession studies war. Martial's military, and he's talking about, if you are a warrior as a martial artist, you're a martial artist. If you're a warrior, no matter what, you know, level you're on, you are a martial artist. You're someone who is studying and living in and training in the art of military combat, the art of these things. And dude, that's like a hugely important thing too, because going back to the day, if you didn't, I mean, basically, you know, in our ignorance at the time, if you didn't have a corpsman, you were dead, right? You got wounded, corpsman up or medic up, no medic, you're dead.
The big thing, I remember a lot of useless information from boot camp, and not just boot camp, but boot camp on. You know, I don't think ever again in my life will I create a defensive position, but I can recite this priority of work: safe, security, automatic weapons, field of fire, entrenchment.
Flight crew notebook is like in my brain
exactly.
right now. I'm looking at the checklist in my brain.
So I'm filled with all this useless information, and one of the things, as I search my informational Rolodex in my head for medical information not received after the Marine Corps or not received after being in the fleet or whatever, the only thing that I can remember is, and you probably have to correct me because it's been a while, stop the bleeding, start the breathing, treat the wound,
and treat for shock. I believe that was it, yeah.
Yeah, check the wound and treat for shock.
Yeah.
So we went from when I went through boot camp and basic training, school of infantry, that being the standard for medical treatment to, use of tourniquets. Now we have these inflatable belts.
Yeah.
Chest seals. We have, gauze packing the wounds and, all kind of different versions of litters that we have. The Skedcos, which are basically like a plastic sled that has a harness that you can drag it, so much better than all the other things we have. But yeah, the medical side and preserving your presence on the battlefield is just as important as your initial presence on the battlefield.
It's absolutely.
I'm of no use to you or Matt if I'm kicking and screaming, losing blood at the cyclic rate on the floor. Mm-hmm. And you guys are trying to either treat me or medevac me.
Yeah, first stage is self-aid, right?
Exactly.
Fix yourself and get back in the fight. And that is, and that's one of the hardest things that guys learn too. And kind of the newer, it's not new anymore, but it's new to us because we're old dudes. But I'm saying, like the transition was, your mission. The old thing was if you trained at all, it was this guy's shot, get him off the battlefield. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything was he's shot, get your wound off the battlefield. And that transition to your shot, get back in a fight. Okay, your shot, save your own life, or their shot, save their lives. If you're learning the medical stuff to get you back in a fight, the chances that you're going to survive are way higher anyway. And this is why we're seeing it. You
got guys decompressing themselves.
They're treating their own.
When their lungs are filled up, they whip out
or
the needle.
The air outside of the lung. There's a hole in the lung,
right,
and there's air outside is building up, and it's causing their organs to kind of push in on each other. So they're having to create a hole to let that pressure out. And you see guys doing this themselves now.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was like, remember when that movie Three Kings come out back in the 90s with George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg,
right,
and he did that, and everybody's like, oh my God, he must be a surgeon,
right.
And now that's like, that's very basic.
Or when you would see on a movie a guy like
tracheotomy,
do a tracheotomy, and that's like common practice stuff.
Yeah.
The nasal pharyngeals.
We become so much better
in that aspect, and that's one of the things. A lot of times when we have discussions like this, we focus on the negatives, but that by far is an astronomical leap from start the breathing, stop the bleeding, check the wound, and treat for shock.
And I'll tell you something else too. I remember, when all this first started. People can think what they want, and I understand that back in the 90s, everyone thought that there were all these, secret covert units running all over the world getting all this combat experience. But in reality, there's always something going on behind the curtains. But most units, SEALs, Force Recon, no matter who it was, most people didn't have very much. There wasn't anything going on. I don't care what people think. The reality is there wasn't a whole lot going on. And if it was so specialized, there just wasn't a whole lot of casualties coming from it, different things like that. And I remember going into, when we went to the War on Terror, most of your military medics or your military medical professionals, if they really had the opportunity to become really good at what they were going to do, then they learned from civilian. Okay, mm-hmm. It was like, well, go to the bring dudes from the cities, ER doctors from the cities, and that was how they learned. And now that we've been at war since 2001. Isn't it funny how the shift now? Doctors are learning so much from the combat medics, right. And so we learned from civilian medicine just to get us in a position where we could save lives. And then in turn, it's like they invested in the military. Like, we're going to teach you guys in one way or another how to do this the right way so you guys can survive. And then in the flip flop is the return on the investment is now civilian medicine is learning how to save lives. And then you got these flight medics that are coming back from Iraq who were on, they may have been with whatever units, and they were medics on birds and stuff over there. So you're in ER doctors who who maybe some going back and forth. We had one here in town who was an Army Reserve doctor, and he's also was a doctor at the clinic, and his name escapes me right now, but he was, he would work at the clinic, and he was reserve, and he'd go to, Iraq. He was actually featured on a documentary or something, but imagine the value that Monticello had from that.
Right.
That probably most people don't even realize that Monticello had was we had a doctor that was going overseas and working in a major trauma thing, and then coming back to come back to this town.
To their credit, there was a major effort put forth in that. I was myself and another guy. We hopped a plane from one part of Afghanistan to another part of Afghanistan. The only other people on the plane with us were a lieutenant colonel and a colonel. One was a trauma nurse, one was a trauma surgeon,
Right.
and they were in Afghanistan to look at traumatic injuries and to go back to the United States and present these injuries to a team
Yeah.
so they could better develop ways to treat these injuries coming off the battlefield.
Oh yeah.
And that's when you think about it, I mean, they're teaching hospitals and clinics all over the world, but when you think about someone leaving a relatively safe setting, putting themselves in a combat environment to examine these injuries and then go back and try to improve the ways that we treat them. I mean, to me, that's, I don't know, man. I give those people a lot of credit for being willing to do that. And that's, if we go back to our original topic, if we took that approach to warfighting, where we actually went and we observed the tactics and techniques of, well, we're just going to do what we've always done.
Right.
And we went back and we sat down with a panel of true warfighting experts.
Right.
And we said,
had a review board.
How can we improve this? I feel like we'd be in a lot better position from an individual training standpoint and from an overall warfighting standpoint. And I don't want to get too much into the we were mostly going to talk about individual training and stuff like that, but
we let it go where it goes, man.
It's the same thing is applicable though. And I've made this analogy several times about the gym or whatever, and I've told people several times when I talk to them about firearms training is, Matt's probably seen me, I don't know, you've probably seen whatever. I've always got like a little pad, I'm always writing stuff down when I'm in the gym. And for me, the best results I've ever had fitness-wise was when I paid attention to everything, sets, reps, what I was doing, how much weight I was doing, because you don't know if you're lifting more this week than you were last week unless you have something to compare it to.
And if you don't, you will navigate yourself right in the circles. Just the analogy goes in the tree.
How many people
looking at your compass and recording your pace, keep track of your pace counts and your distance and plotting your course, which is what you're doing in the gym, you will walk in circles. I don't know how many times I've come to the gym and I thought I was doing different stuff and improving until I went back, because I record what I do, but not necessarily. I was really bad about actually checking to see what I've actually done, and I realized I just did a lot and I did nothing.
Yeah,
I accomplished absolutely
zero. And that's
zero.
the same approach. Nobody walks into somebody who's serious about getting better. Nobody walks in here every day, and as their foot crosses the threshold, they say, "You know what? I think today I'm going to lift pinky toe and right earlobe."
Yeah.
No, nobody that's serious does that.
Right.
And that's the approach that you don't need to bring to the range. One of my pet peeves is when I go out to the range to shoot and there's somebody there and they're just, they've got a target taped, or they got a 2-liter Pepsi bottle downrange and they're just throwing rounds at it.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally would do just as good to reach down in your ammo bucket and pick up a handful of rounds and throw it. That's what you're doing. If you don't have a standard, if you haven't developed a standard, if you don't have a qualitative and quantitative comparison to where you were before to where you are now to where you want to be, you're going to be the same, if not worse.
I heard someone used to say something like that one time. They went to the range with some guys who kind of did that. And I said, "So how was your range?" And he said, "Before I'll go back to the range with those dudes, I'm going to go to my house. Before I'll ever do that again, I'm going to go to my house. I'm going to grab all my brass," because he reloads. "And I'm just going to drive out to the range. I'm going to take all my brass. I'm just going to sling it all over the range, just all the casings, just sling it all over the grass. And I'm getting my truck and I'm going to leave." And he said, "I would have had the same effect and not actually spent any money on ammunition." You know what I mean? Because basically at the end of it, all he had was a bunch of empty case, bullets. I mean, it didn't matter. And, I've been guilty of that, and I've been guilty of it there. I've been guilty of similar stuff at the gym. I've been guilty of similar, but just like you said, it's a complete waste of time if you're not keeping track of what if your goal should be to improve. In order to improve, you have to have specifics.
Right. Like,
what am I going to improve on? I'm going to get better. How are you going to get better today? It's like life or anything else. These SEALs and these guys are going around on these speaking tours are making, God, I don't know how much I'm making on seminars for teaching this basic stuff, which is have goals, have specifics. You know what I mean?
Well,
and achieve them.
Speaking of that, you're talking about specifics. Everybody wants to be faster. One of them, again, I'll say this several times, one of my pet peeves is when I hear somebody say, smooth is fast and fast is smooth.
Slow is smooth as
Or slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Slow is not fast. Just like big is not small and small is not big.
Right.
You can.
What they're trying to say is slow. Hopefully.
What they're trying to say is economy of motion.
Yeah.
Which in appearance is smooth.
Right. Right.
Economy of motion results in faster performance.
Right.
That's true. I mean, let's look at again. Let's make that comparison to the gym. Let's look at the snatch. If you have economy of motion in your snatch, it's going to look like it just magically appears.
Right.
I mean, it just happens. Bam. And it's up there. Same thing with a draw and an engagement on 3 targets, reload and engagement on 3 targets. Mm-hmm. It's going to look like it just happened.
Right.
That doesn't mean that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That means that economy of motion resulted in a faster performance.
Right.
That's what that means. So, I know we fall into these traps of, we hear something that sounds good, just like high speed, low drag. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what that means.
You're not.
You know what I mean? Like, I get it. High speed, low drag.
But how does that relate to what
yeah.
Like, we know what literally high speed, low drag means. Minimize drag, increase the the velocity. But what he's saying is, like, how does that apply to? What does that have to do with anything?
But but as far as some of the things, for a minute, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I've come into contact with that I feel like we trick ourselves with.
Okay.
One of them is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. No. If you want to be fast, train to be fast. But accuracy should take precedence over speed. Because like you said earlier,
I think that's the problem.
If you can't hit an elephant in the butt with a blunderbuss, there's no sense in trying to be fast. At
the same time, and I'm going to answer that, sometimes we train to be accurately slow. Or slowly accurate, and that's all we ever do. In other words, okay, so
if you're not training with a timer, you're cheating yourself.
So I've got to where I can I'm hitting X, okay, at whatever yard line I'm at. Every time I draw, I can draw, and I can hit exactly where I'm aiming. But now what? Do you think you're going to just automatically get faster because you can hit the X? No, you have to actually start shooting at the X faster. You're gonna drop back down that where you're going to throw them out, and you have to bring yourself back in at that speed. So the only way, like you said, the only way you're going to get fast and accurate is you've got to train accurately faster. And it's going to require. It's just like it's like running. I'm not unless I'm not running sprints. I'm just going to be a slow jogger for the rest.
3 miles at an 8-minute mile pace,
I'm not going to get faster just because I'm doing that. No.
If I don't complete more sets, more reps, or lift more weight, I'm not going to get any stronger or develop any more muscle. Same thing with shooting. The other thing is practice makes perfect.
No.
That's not correct.
Yeah.
Perfect practice makes perfect.
That's right. Practice just makes practice. Practice makes zilch. It's zero, nothing, maybe more.
So if I practice, we'll go to something easy, the draw. If I practice the draw, the handgun draw, and I'm doing the old bowling, whip it out like Festus from Gunsmoke.
Right.
If I practice that, guess what? I'm going to be perfect at doing that.
Yeah.
But if I practice a good draw, then I'll be perfect doing that. So,